I'm Bethany Gordon, 28, and I graduated summa cum laude from Harvard Business School with a master's degree that cost my family $200,000. When I moved back home after graduation, my stepmother Linda smiled sweetly and handed me rubber gloves. Since you're living here rent-free, you can earn your keep cleaning bathrooms. For 3 months, I scrubbed toilets while my half-brother Jake lounged by the pool, bragging about his trust fund. What they didn't know was that I'd been quietly building a tech startup from my childhood bedroom. The day I made that one phone call to my investor, everything changed. Linda's face went white when she realized the failure she'd been humiliating was about to become a multimillionaire. If you've ever been underestimated by your own family, hit that like button and subscribe because this story gets so much better. To understand how I ended up scrubbing toilets with a Harvard MBA, you need to know about the family photos that still sits on our mantelpiece. In it, Linda has her arms wrapped around Jake, both of them beaming at the camera. My father stands, slightly to the side, his hand on my shoulder, but even in that frozen moment, you can see the divide that's defined our family for 16 years. Linda married my father when I was 12, just 2 years after my mother died from cancer. She brought Jake with her, a spoiled 10-year-old who'd never heard the word no. From day one, Linda made it clear that Jake was the golden child, and I was the inconvenient reminder of my father's previous life. The favoritism wasn't subtle. When Jake got a C in math, Linda celebrated by taking him out for ice cream, praising his improvement. When I brought home straight A's, she'd glance at my report card and say, "Well, that's what we expect from you, isn't it?" Jake got a new video game system for his birthday. I got a lecture about being grateful for what I had. My father, bless his heart, tried to maintain some balance, but Linda had a way of making him feel guilty about giving me any attention. She'd sigh dramatically and say things like, "I just want Jake to feel loved too." Whenever Dad tried to celebrate my achievements, over time Dad learned it was easier to stay quiet than to deal with Linda's passive-aggressive warfare. The pattern continued through high school. Jake could skip class, party, and barely graduate, but Linda would defend him with statements like, "He's just finding himself." Meanwhile, I was expected to be perfect. When I got into Harvard, Linda's reaction was telling, "Well, I hope all that studying was worth it. Jake's going to community college, and he'll probably be just as successful." Even then, I could see the truth she wouldn't acknowledge. His laziness was taking life at his own pace. The worst part wasn't the favoritism itself, it was watching my father slowly give up on fighting for me. He loved me, I knew that, but Linda had worn him down with years of emotional manipulation. She had a talent for making him feel like supporting me meant betraying Jake, and Dad was too conflict-averse to see through her games. By the time I left for college, our family dynamic was set in stone. Jake was the prince who could do no wrong. Linda was the queen who protected him from all consequences. And I was the court jester expected to entertain them all while asking for nothing in return. But here's what Linda never understood about me: every slight. While Jake was learning that life would hand him everything, I was learning that I'd have to fight for every opportunity. While he was developing a sense of entitlement, I was developing an unshakable work ethic. That family photo might show Linda and Jake at the center, but what it really captured was the moment I decided I'd never depend on their approval again. The Harvard acceptance letter arrived on a Tuesday in March, and I'll never forget the silence that followed my announcement at dinner. I'd been checking my email obsessively for weeks, and when I saw that acceptance, I literally screamed with joy in my dorm room. Getting into Harvard Business School was the culmination of 4 years of perfect grades, leadership positions, and career-building internships. But when I called home with the news, Linda's first response wasn't congratulations, it was concern. About the cost? $200,000. For business school, Bethany, that's more than most people make in 4 years. She said it like I was being frivolous, like I was asking to spend the family fortune on designer handbags. My father's reaction was more complex. I could hear the pride in his voice, but also worry. "That's a lot of debt, sweetheart. Are you sure this is the right path?" He'd been supportive of my education, but the financial reality of Harvard was intimidating even for him. Jake, predictably, rolled his eyes. "Great. Now we'll have to listen to her brag about Harvard for the next 2 years. Linda actually laughed at this, as if my achievement was somehow an inconvenience to the rest of the family. The student loan documents I signed that spring still make my stomach turn when I think about them. $200,000 in debt before I even started my career. Most of my classmates had family money or corporate sponsorships, but I was flying solo with nothing but my determination and a mountain of debt. Linda never missed an opportunity to remind me about this burden I'd chosen. "I just don't understand why you need such an expensive school," she'd say during my brief visits home. "Jake's doing just fine at community college, and he's not drowning in debt." The comparison was absurd. Jake was taking remedial courses and spending most of his time playing video games, while I was studying corporate finance and strategy at one of the world's most prestigious institutions. The contrast became even more stark during my second year when Jake turned 21. Linda threw him a massive birthday party, complete with a DJ and catered food. The gift, a brand new BMW, paid for with cash from Dad's savings account. When I asked Dad about it later, he looked embarrassed. Linda thought Jake needed reliable transportation for his job search, he explained weakly. Jake had been job searching for 8 months without submitting a single application. Meanwhile, I was working 3 part-time jobs to cover my living expenses. I tutored undergraduates, worked at the business school library, and spent weekends doing freelance marketing projects. My classmates were networking at expensive restaurants and taking unpaid internships at prestigious firms. While I was calculating whether I could afford groceries or textbooks that week, the irony wasn't lost on me. Jake was getting a BMW for doing nothing while I was mortgaging my future for the chance to succeed. But every time I felt sorry for myself, I'd remember that this education was mine. No one could take it away from me, no one could diminish it, and no one could claim credit for it. Graduation day was particularly telling. My father came alone. Linda claimed she was too busy with Jake's community college graduation party to attend both. Dad looked proud but overwhelmed as he watched me walk across that stage. Later, he admitted that seeing me graduate from Harvard was one of the proudest moments of his life, but Linda had made him feel guilty for even wanting to attend. That night, as I packed up my dorm room, I looked at my Harvard diploma and made myself a promise. This piece of paper represented more than just an education. It was proof that I could achieve anything I set my mind to, regardless of my family's support or lack thereof. I just had to figure out how to turn this expensive education into the success I'd always dreamed of. Coming home after Harvard graduation felt like stepping backwards through time. My childhood bedroom looked exactly the same: pink walls, posters of boy bands I'd outgrown a decade ago, and a twin bed that felt ridiculously small after 2 years of dorm life. But it was my only option. Despite my impressive degree, the job market was brutal, and my student loan payments were going to start in 6 months whether I had income or not. Linda's welcoming committee consisted of a bucket, rubber, gloves, and a bottle of toilet bowl cleaner. She presented them to me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Since you're living here rent-free, you can earn your keep," she announced. As if this was the most reasonable arrangement in the world. The upstairs bathrooms need deep cleaning, and Jake's bathroom is particularly disgusting. I stared at the cleaning supplies, then at Linda, then at my father, who was suddenly very interested in his newspaper. "You want me to clean toilets?" I asked, certain I'd misunderstood. "Honey, everyone contributes to this household," Linda replied sweetly. "Jake helps with yard work when he has time, and you can handle the cleaning. It's only fair." The yard work Jake supposedly did consisted of occasionally moving the sprinkler from one spot to another while lounging in a pool chair. But I bit my tongue and took the supplies. I needed a place to live, and arguing would only make things worse. That first day of toilet scrubbing was one of the most humiliating experiences of my life. Here I was, with a Harvard MBA, on my hands and knees cleaning the bathroom that Jake used as his personal disaster zone. The irony was suffocating. I'd spent 2 years studying how to run Fortune 500 companies, and now I was literally cleaning up after my stepbrother, who couldn't even be bothered to put the toilet seat down. Jake found the whole situation hilarious. He'd invite his equally lazy friends over just to introduce me as the Harvard janitor. They'd laugh and make jokes about how expensive my toilet cleaning education must have been. Jake would join in, adding comments like, maybe they should add bathroom maintenance to the Harvard curriculum. The worst part was how Linda encouraged this behavior. She'd laugh along with Jake's jokes and even add her own commentary about how some people think they're too good for honest work. When I tried to job hunt during the day, she'd interrupt with more cleaning tasks, claiming they were urgent and couldn't wait. My father's silence was almost more painful than Linda's. Active cruelty. I could see the discomfort in his eyes when Jake made his jokes, but he never said anything. He'd developed this ability to become suddenly invisible whenever conflict arose, retreating into his home office or finding urgent errands that took him away from the house. After 3 weeks of this routine, I reached my breaking point. I was applying for jobs from my phone while sitting on the bathroom floor, taking breaks from scrubbing grout to submit resumes to consulting firms. The absurdity of it hit me like a physical blow. I was more qualified than most people applying for these positions, yet I was spending my days cleaning toilets because my stepmother enjoyed the power trip that night. Alone in my childhood bedroom, I cried for the first time since coming home, not just from frustration but from the crushing realization that my own family saw my Harvard degree as worthless. They'd rather have me as their personal cleaning service than support me during my job search. But as I lay there looking at my diploma on the wall, the one tangible proof of my capabilities, something shifted inside me. Linda could make me clean toilets, Jake could mock my education, and Dad could remain silent. But none of them could change what I'd accomplished or limit what I could still achieve. I made a decision that night. If they wanted to treat me like hired help, I'd use, this time strategically. While they saw a defeated Harvard graduate cleaning bathrooms, I'd be planning my next move. They had no idea what I was capable of, and I was going to use their underestimation to my advantage. The cleaning supplies Linda had given me weren't just tools for scrubbing toilets, they were symbols of every obstacle I'd overcome to get this far. And just like I'd conquered Harvard despite their lack of support, I'd find a way to turn this humiliation into triumph. My laptop became my lifeline in those dark weeks of toilet scrubbing and family humiliation. Every night after Linda's cleaning assignments, I'd retreat to my room and open up the project that had been brewing in my mind since my final semester. At Harvard, while my classmates had been networking at wine bars and landing cushy corporate jobs, I'd been quietly developing something revolutionary. The idea had started during a corporate finance class when our professor discussed the massive gap in financial planning services for middle-class families. Wealthy clients had access to sophisticated financial advisors, while average earners were stuck with basic banking apps that barely scratched the surface of real financial strategy. But what if artificial intelligence could democratize financial planning? I'd spent my last semester at Harvard researching AI applications in financial services, studying machine learning algorithms, and building a prototype for an AI-powered financial planning platform. My professors had been impressed, but I'd kept the commercial potential quiet. Something told me to protect this idea until I was ready to fully develop it now. Sitting in my childhood bedroom at 2 a.m. with the taste of bathroom cleaner still in my mouth, that prototype became my escape and my obsession. While Jake snored in the next room and Linda slept peacefully, knowing she'd humiliated me for another day, I was building the foundation of what would become my empire. The AI platform I was developing would analyze users' spending patterns, income fluctuations, and financial goals to create personalized investment strategies and budgeting plans. It would learn from each user's behavior and adjust recommendations in real time, essentially providing everyone with their own personal financial advisor for a fraction of the traditional cost. The technical challenges were immense. I had to teach myself advanced programming languages, study financial modeling techniques that weren't covered in business school, and figure out how to make complex algorithms accessible to ordinary users. But every small breakthrough felt like a victory against the family that saw me as nothing more than their cleaning lady. My daily routine became a careful balance of maintaining Linda's facade while pursuing my real work. I'd wake up at 5 a.m. to code before anyone else was awake, clean bathrooms and scrub floors during the day while my mind worked through programming problems, then return to my laptop until well past midnight. I was running on caffeine, determination, and the burning desire to prove everyone wrong. The hardest part was maintaining absolute secrecy. Linda had a habit of checking on me at random times, and I couldn't risk her discovering what I was really doing. To her, I needed to appear defeated and dependent, grateful for their generosity in letting me live at home. But behind my bedroom door, I was building something that would make Jake's trust fund look like pocket change. I started reaching out to AI researchers and financial technology experts through online forums and social media. Most ignored my messages, but a few were intrigued by my approach. I began building a network of contacts who didn't know I was currently scrubbing toilets for my family. They only knew me as a Harvard MBA with innovative ideas about financial technology. The breakthrough came during my 6th week at home. I'd been struggling with a particularly complex algorithm that would analyze spending patterns to predict future financial needs. At 3 a.m., exhausted and frustrated, I finally cracked the code. The AI could now identify spending trends and suggest budget adjustments with an accuracy rate that exceeded anything currently on the market. As I watched the program run its first successful test, analyzing my own pitiful financial situation, and somehow finding opportunities for improvement even in my current state, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Hope. This wasn't just a pipe dream anymore, it was a functional technology with massive commercial potential that night. As I carefully closed my laptop and hid my work before Linda's morning inspection, I realized I was no longer just surviving my family's cruelty. I was using it as fuel for something extraordinary. Every toilet I scrubbed, every joke Jake made, every dismissive comment from Linda was now contributing to my motivation to succeed beyond their wildest imagination. The cleaning supplies Linda had given me were sitting in the corner, but the real tools of my future success were right there on my desk: my laptop, my determination, and a revolutionary AI platform that was about to change everything. Jake's 25th birthday arrived like a tornado of entitlement and excess. Linda had been planning his trust fund celebration for months, talking about it constantly while I scrubbed baseboards and cleaned windows. The trust fund his biological father had set up would become accessible on his birthday, and Linda treated this inheritance as if Jake had personally earned every penny through years of hard work and dedication. The trust fund statement arrived a week before his birthday, and Linda couldn't contain her excitement. $2 million. Jake would have access to $2 million simply for reaching the age of 25. Linda waved the papers around like they were Jake's diploma from medical school, beaming with pride at his achievement. "Can you believe it?" she gushed. "To anyone who would listen, my son is going to be a millionaire. He's always been so smart with money." This was particularly ridiculous considering Jake had never held a job longer than 3 weeks and had spent the last 4 years asking Dad for gas money. The birthday party itself was a testament to Linda's delusions about her son's worth. She rented out the backyard of an expensive restaurant, hired a DJ, and invited everyone they knew to celebrate Jake's success. I was expected to attend, of course, but also to help serve drinks and clean up afterward, because even at Jake's celebration I was still the help. Watching Jake accept congratulations for his windfall was nauseating. People kept praising his good fortune and talking about his bright future, as if receiving an inheritance required any skill or effort. Jake ate up every word, acting like he'd built a business empire instead of simply surviving to his birthday. The most absurd moment came when Jake gave an impromptu speech thanking everyone for their support. "I've always believed in working smart, not just working hard," he declared, while I literally held a tray of appetizers I'd prepared for his guests. "This trust fund is going to let me pursue my real passions and maybe start my own business." Linda wiped away tears of pride, and several guests nodded approvingly at Jake's wisdom. I wanted to scream. Jake's idea of working smart was manipulating Dad into paying his bills while he played video games all day. His real passions consisted of sleeping until noon and complaining about how hard life was. The trust fund instantly transformed Jake from a lazy 25-year-old into the family's golden boy entrepreneur. Within a week, he'd bought a Tesla, booked a month-long vacation to Europe, and started talking about investment opportunities he was considering. Linda hung on his every word, treating his random thoughts about maybe buying rental properties someday as if he were Warren Buffett sharing market insights. Meanwhile, I was still cleaning his bathroom, which had somehow become even more disgusting since he'd gained access to millions. The irony was suffocating. Jake now had more money than most people earn in a lifetime, while I was scrubbing his toilet. Despite having an education that cost more than most people's houses, the family dynamic shifted dramatically after Jake's windfall. Dad started asking Jake for financial advice, as if inheriting money had suddenly given him expertise in wealth management. Linda would bring up Jake's business acumen in every conversation, pointing to his trust fund as proof of his superior intelligence and judgment. But the most painful part was how they used Jake's sudden wealth to diminish my accomplishments even further. "Jake's doing so well for himself," Linda would say. "When I mentioned my job applications, maybe you should ask him for advice about financial success." The suggestion that I should learn about money management from someone who'd never earned a dollar was beyond insulting. Jake, drunk on his new millionaire status, became even more insufferable. He'd wave his black credit card around when paying for things, make loud phone calls about his investment portfolio, and constantly reference his business plans that never materialized into actual action. He started treating me like his personal assistant, expecting me to coordinate his travel plans and research his fantasy business ventures. One evening, as I organized Jake's receipts from his European shopping spree while he bragged to friends about his entrepreneurial mindset, I realized something important. Jake's trust fund was actually a gift to me. It showed everyone exactly who he really was. Someone who thought wealth was the same as worth, money was the same as merit, and inheritance was the same as achievement. While Jake was spending his unearned millions on toys and trips, I was building something that would create real value and lasting success. His trust fund statement might have impressed Linda, but my AI platform was going to change the world. The difference was that Jake would always be limited by what someone else had given him, while my potential was limited only by my own imagination and effort. That night, as I worked on my code while Jake posted Instagram photos of his latest expensive purchases, I smiled for the first time in weeks. Let him enjoy his trust fund. I was building something much more valuable. The business cards I collected from the Tech Innovators Networking event became my most precious possessions. Hidden in my bedroom like treasure maps to my future, getting to that event required military-level planning and deception. Linda had scheduled me to deep clean the garage that evening, but I told her I had a job interview and needed to leave early. She rolled her eyes but agreed, probably hoping I'd finally find work and move out. The event was held at a sleek downtown hotel, and I felt completely out of place walking in wearing my only professional outfit, a suit I'd bought for Harvard interviews 3 years earlier. Everyone else looked polished and successful, discussing funding rounds and market valuations, while I tried to hide the fact that I'd spent the morning scrubbing grout with a toothbrush. I almost left twice before finally approaching the registration table. The imposter syndrome was overwhelming. What was I doing here? I was living in my childhood bedroom, cleaning toilets for my stepfamily, and pretending to be a serious entrepreneur. But then I thought about my AI platform, the breakthrough I'd had just weeks earlier, and the genuine innovation I'd developed. I belonged here more than half these people who were probably pitching recycled ideas with fancy presentations. That's when I met Marcus Webb. He was standing alone near the refreshment table checking his phone, and something about his calm demeanor made him seem approachable. Marcus was a managing partner at Venture Dynamics, one of the most respected investment firms in the region, though I didn't know that when I introduced myself. Bethany Gordon, I said, extending my hand with more confidence than I felt. I'm developing an AI-powered financial planning platform. Marcus looked up from his phone, and I could see him taking in my appearance, the slightly wrinkled suit, the nervous energy, the fact that I was clearly not part of the usual networking crowd. But instead of dismissing me, he seemed intrigued. "Tell me more," he said simply. For the next 20 minutes, I forgot about Linda's cleaning assignments, Jake's trust fund, and my family's complete lack of faith in me. I explained my AI platform with passion and precision, describing how it could democratize financial planning and make sophisticated wealth management accessible to middle-class families. Marcus asked insightful questions about my algorithms, my market research, and my monetization strategy. "Have you tested this with real users?" he asked. "I've run it on my own financial data and several anonymous volunteers through online forums," I replied. "The accuracy rate is consistently higher than existing robo-advisors, and the user interface is significantly more intuitive." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "What's your background? Where did you develop this expertise?" "Harvard Business School, class of 2021. I specialized in financial technology and spent my thesis year researching AI applications in personal finance." That caught his attention. "You're fresh out of Harvard with an AI fintech platform that's already showing promising results." He paused, studying me more carefully. "Why aren't you working for Goldman Sachs or McKinsey?" The question hit me like a physical blow, forcing me to confront the reality of my situation. How could I explain that I was living at home cleaning toilets and being treated like a failure by my own family? How could I admit that despite my Harvard education and innovative technology, I was completely dependent on people who saw me as worthless? "I wanted to focus on building something meaningful instead of climbing someone else's corporate ladder," I said finally. It wasn't entirely a lie. Had chosen to develop my platform instead of taking traditional job offers, but it certainly wasn't the whole truth. Marcus smiled. "That's exactly what I like to hear. Too many Harvard grads think they need to follow the prescribed path. The real innovators are willing to take risks." He handed me his business card, a simple white card, with elegant black lettering that somehow felt more valuable than Jake's trust fund statement. "I'd like to see a formal presentation of your platform. Can you put together a comprehensive pitch deck and financial projections?" My heart was racing, but I kept my voice steady. "Absolutely. When would you like to schedule this?" "How about next week? I'll have my assistant set up a meeting at our office. Bring your laptop and be prepared to demonstrate the platform live." As Marcus walked away to rejoin his colleagues, I stared at his business card in disbelief. A real venture capitalist wanted to see my work. Someone who invested millions of dollars in startups thought my idea had potential. After months of being treated like a failure, a stranger had recognized my worth in a 20-minute conversation. The drive home was surreal. I was still clutching Marcus's business card, already planning my presentation and thinking about how to explain my technology to investors. But as I pulled into our driveway, reality crashed back down. Linda was waiting for me, with her arms crossed, clearly annoyed. "How did your interview go?" she asked sarcastically. "Are you finally going to contribute something to this household?" "It went well," I replied carefully. "I have a follow-up meeting next week." Linda snorted. "Well, don't get your hopes up. You still have chores to finish tonight. The garage won't clean itself." As I put on my rubber gloves and started organizing paint cans and old Christmas decorations, I kept Marcus's business card in my pocket. Every few minutes I'd touch it to make sure it was real, that the evening hadn't been an elaborate daydream. Someone believed in me and my vision. Someone saw potential where my own family saw only failure. That night, I worked on my pitch deck. Until sunrise, fueled by possibility and determination, Marcus Webb didn't know he was potentially investing in someone who spent her days cleaning toilets. But he'd soon learn that he was looking at the next big thing in financial technology. The deleted email chain I discovered on Linda's computer revealed the true extent of her manipulation. But I'm getting ahead of myself. First, let me tell you about the week leading up to my meeting with Marcus Webb, when Linda's behavior shifted. From passive-aggressive to actively sabotaging, it started when she noticed I was spending more time on my laptop and less time wallowing in self-pity. Linda had a sixth sense for detecting when people in her orbit were getting too confident or independent, and my newfound energy after the networking event had set off her alarm bells. "You seem awfully busy lately," she commented on Tuesday morning, watching me quickly close my laptop when she entered the kitchen. "I hope you're not neglecting your responsibilities to this household." I assured her I wasn't, but Linda wasn't satisfied. She started checking on me more frequently, inventing urgent cleaning tasks whenever I seemed focused on something else. The day before my scheduled meeting with Marcus, she decided the entire house needed deep cleaning immediately. "I've invited the neighbors over for dinner tomorrow night," she announced, though no such dinner had been mentioned before. "This place needs to be spotless. You'll need to scrub all the bathrooms, vacuum every room, and organize the garage again. Jake's friends made a mess last weekend." The timing was suspicious, but I couldn't prove she was deliberately interfering with my meeting preparation. I spent the entire day cleaning while frantically trying to practice my presentation in my head. Every time I tried to sneak a few minutes with my laptop, Linda would appear with another urgent task. That evening, as I finally sat down to finalize my pitch deck, my phone rang. It was Marcus Webb's assistant, calling to reschedule our meeting. "Mr. Webb had an unexpected conflict arise," she explained. "Could we move the meeting to next week instead?" I agreed, of course, but something felt wrong. Later that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that Linda had somehow interfered. She'd been unusually cheerful during dinner, almost smug, and she kept making comments about how some people's big plans don't always work out. My suspicions were confirmed the next morning when I found Linda's computer unlocked in the home office. I wasn't intentionally snooping. I was looking for the vacuum cleaner manual she'd asked me to find, but her email was open on the screen. What I saw made my blood run cold. There, in her recently deleted folder, was an email exchange with Marcus Webb's office. Linda had somehow found out about my meeting and had called his assistant claiming to be my concerned family member. She'd told them I was going through a difficult emotional period, and that I might not be in the right headspace for important business meetings. She'd suggested they postpone to give me time to get my life together. The assistant had been professional but concerned, agreeing to reschedule and asking if there was anything they could do to help. Linda had responded with fake gratitude, playing the role of the caring stepmother who was just looking out for my best interests. I stared at the screen in disbelief. Linda hadn't just passively hoped for my failure, she'd actively sabotaged my biggest opportunity. She'd contacted my potential investor and essentially told them I was unstable and unreliable. The woman who forced me to clean toilets was now sabotaging my attempts to build a career. But Linda had made a crucial mistake. She'd underestimated both my determination and my intelligence. Instead of confronting her directly, I decided to play her own game. I carefully restored the deleted emails, took screenshots of everything, and began planning my counterattack. Over the next few days, I watched Linda's behavior more carefully. She'd developed a routine of checking my computer history when she thought I wasn't around, monitoring my phone calls, and even going through my belongings to see what I was working on. She'd recruited Jake to help, asking him to casually inquire about my activities and report back to her. Jake, oblivious to the manipulation, actually warned me about Linda's surveillance. "Mom's acting weird about you lately," he mentioned. "One evening, she keeps asking what you're doing on your computer and whether you're talking to anyone about job stuff. I told her you're probably just playing games or whatever." Even Jake could see that Linda's behavior was excessive, though he didn't understand the full scope of her interference. To him, it was just mom being nosy. To me, it was a calculated campaign to keep me dependent and unsuccessful. The final straw came when Linda started intercepting my mail. I was expecting some legal documents related to incorporating my business, but they never arrived. When I called the law office, they confirmed the documents had been sent to my home address. Linda, it turned out, had been collecting my mail and hiding anything that looked official or business-related that night. I found my missing documents in Linda's bedroom, stuffed in a folder with other papers she'd intercepted over the past month. There were responses from potential clients I'd contacted, information about small business loans, and even a follow-up email from Marcus's office confirming our rescheduled meeting. Linda wasn't just passively hoping I'd fail, she was actively working to ensure it. She'd created a systematic campaign to isolate me from opportunities, sabotage my professional relationships, and keep me trapped in her vision of who I should be. The failure who cleaned her toilets and made Jake look successful by comparison? But as I carefully photographed every document she'd hidden and prepared my evidence, I realized Linda had just made the biggest mistake of her life. She'd shown me exactly who she really was and exactly how far she was willing to go to control me. Now I knew I wasn't just fighting for my business success, I was fighting for my freedom from a family that would rather see me fail than succeed. Without their permission, the game had changed, and Linda had no idea what she'd just unleashed. The term sheet draft that Marcus Webb slid across his conference table was the most beautiful document I'd ever seen. But I'm getting ahead of myself first. Let me tell you about the meeting that changed everything. Despite Linda's sabotage attempts, I'd managed to reschedule with Marcus's office and prepare for what I knew would be the most important presentation of my life. I told Linda I had a dentist appointment, packed my laptop in an old backpack, and drove to the gleaming downtown office building that housed Venture Dynamics. The elevator ride to the 32nd floor felt like ascending to another world. Through the glass walls of the conference room, I could see the city sprawling below, and for a moment, I imagined what it would feel like to belong in a place like this. Instead of scrubbing toilets in my stepfamily's house, Marcus was waiting, with two other partners, Sarah Chen, who specialized in fintech investments, and David Rodriguez, their technical due diligence expert. They were all impeccably dressed, confident, and clearly successful. I smoothed down my suit jacket and tried to channel the Harvard MBA I'd earned. Instead of the toilet scrubbing failure my family saw, "Bethany, thank you for coming in," Marcus said warmly. "I've been looking forward to seeing what you've built." I opened my laptop and launched into the presentation I'd rehearsed dozens of times in my bedroom mirror. But something magical happened. As I began explaining my AI platform, my nervousness disappeared. This was my creation, my innovation, my solution to a real problem that affected millions of people. Traditional financial advisors charge 1 to 2% of assets under management, I explained, clicking through my slides. That means a family with $50,000 in savings pays $500 to $1,000 annually for basic portfolio management. My AI platform provides the same level of sophisticated analysis and personalized recommendations for a flat monthly fee of $29. Sarah leaned forward. "What's your competitive advantage?" "There are other robo-advisors in the market. 3 key differentiators," I replied confidently. "First, my AI doesn't just manage investments, it analyzes spending patterns, predicts future expenses, and adjusts recommendations in real time. Second, it incorporates behavioral psychology to help users overcome common financial mistakes. Third, it provides educational content that evolves based on each user's financial literacy level." David asked about the technical architecture, and I dove into the details of my machine learning algorithms. I could see him taking notes, nodding as I explained how my system learned from user behavior and improved its recommendations over time. "Show us the platform," Marcus requested. This was the moment I'd been preparing for. I pulled up my prototype and walked them through a live demonstration, using anonymous sample data to show how the AI analyzed financial situations and provided personalized recommendations. The platform I'd built in my childhood bedroom while my family mocked my Harvard degree was performing flawlessly. "Impressive," Sarah said quietly. "What's your user acquisition strategy?" I outlined my marketing plan, explaining how I'd target middle-class families through social media, financial blogs, and partnerships with credit unions. I'd done extensive research on customer acquisition costs and lifetime value projections. "What about regulatory compliance?" David asked. I'd anticipated this question and spent weeks researching SEQ regulations, state licensing requirements, and data privacy laws. My answers were thorough and demonstrated that I understood the complex legal landscape of financial services. Marcus sat back in his chair, exchanging glances with his partners. "Bethany, I have to ask why. Haven't you been hired by one of the major financial institutions? This is exactly the kind of innovation they're looking for." I'd prepared for this question too, but it still stung. I believe the best financial technology comes from understanding real financial struggles, not from boardrooms where everyone earns 7 figures. I want to build something that actually helps ordinary families, not just wealthy clients. It was mostly true, even if it omitted the part about cleaning toilets for my stepfamily. "Walk us through your financial projections," Sarah said. I opened my spreadsheet and began explaining my revenue model. Year 1, I'm projecting 5,000 users at $29 monthly, generating $1.74 million in revenue. By year 3, with 50,000 users and premium tiers, we'd reach $18 million annually with a 40% profit margin. David studied my numbers carefully. These projections assume significant user growth. "What makes you confident you can scale this quickly?" The market research shows 68% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck, and only 12% have access to professional financial advice, I replied. There's massive pent-up demand for affordable financial guidance. My beta testing showed users reduced unnecessary spending by an average of 23% within the first month. Marcus nodded slowly. What are you looking for from us? $5 million for a 20% equity stake, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. The funding would go toward hiring a development team, obtaining necessary licenses, and user acquisition. The room fell silent. $5 million more than twice Jake's entire trust fund for something I'd built alone in my childhood bedroom while scrubbing toilets during the day. The audacity of asking for that amount suddenly hit me, but I forced myself to sit quietly and wait for their response. Sarah broke the silence. Your technology is impressive, your market analysis is thorough, and your presentation demonstrates both technical competence and business acumen. She paused, but $5 million is a significant investment for a solo founder with no track record. My heart sank. They were going to pass, which is why Marcus continued. We'd like to propose $4 million for 25% equity, with milestone-based funding releases and a seat on your board of directors. I blinked, certain I'd misheard. You're making an offer? We are, Marcus confirmed, but we'll need to complete due diligence. Review your code architecture with our technical team and verify your market research. If everything checks out, we'd like to move forward. David slid a document across the table. This is a preliminary term sheet outlining the basic structure. Take some time to review it, consult with legal counsel, and let us know if you're interested in proceeding. I stared at the document, my hands trembling slightly as I picked it up. The header read term SHEET confidential, and below it, my company name, SmartPath Financial, AI. Seeing it in official investment documents made everything feel suddenly real. One question, Sarah said. Where are you based? Do you have office space, or are you working from home? The question I'd been dreading. I'm currently working from a home office while I focus on product development, I replied diplomatically. With funding, I'd establish proper headquarters and hire a team. Marcus nodded approvingly. Smart to keep overhead low during development. Too many founders waste money on fancy offices before they've proven their concept, as the meeting concluded, and I shook hands with each partner. I felt like I was floating. They believed in my vision. They saw the same potential I'd seen during those late-night coding sessions while my family slept upstairs. They wanted to give me $4 million. To build my dream, walking back to my car, I clutched the term sheet like it was made of gold. Linda thought she'd sabotaged my future by intercepting my mail and delaying my meetings. But she'd only delayed the inevitable. In 30 days, if due diligence went well, I'd be the CEO of a funded startup with access to more money than Jake's trust fund. The drive home was surreal. I was returning to the same house where I'd be expected to clean bathrooms and endure Jake's jokes about my failure to launch a career, but everything had changed. I wasn't just Bethany, the toilet-scrubbing Harvard graduate anymore. I was Bethany Gordon, founder and CEO of SmartPath Financial AI, with a $4 million term sheet in her backpack. Linda was going to discover exactly how wrong she'd been about me, and I couldn't wait to see her face when she realized the failure she'd been humiliating was about to become wildly successful. The legal documents for SmartPath Financial AI Inc. arrived by certified mail on a Tuesday morning, and I had never seen Linda move so fast to intercept something addressed to me. But this time I was ready for her. I'd been expecting the incorporation papers and had arranged to have them delivered to a UPS store instead of our house. Linda's mail interception scheme was no longer a threat. I'd learned to work around her sabotage attempts. The thick envelope contained articles of incorporation, federal tax ID documentation, and official recognition that my AI platform was now a legitimate business entity. The 30-day due diligence period had begun, and Marcus's team was thorough. In their investigation of both my technology and my background, David Rodriguez spent hours reviewing my code architecture, stress-testing my algorithms, and verifying the accuracy of my AI recommendations. Sarah Chen analyzed my market research, called references from my beta testing, and examined my financial projections with a microscope. Meanwhile, I was living a bizarre double life. During the day, I maintained Linda's charade cleaning bathrooms, organizing closets, and enduring Jake's increasingly creative insults about my failure to launch a career. But every evening I was fielding calls from lawyers, accountants, and technical consultants who were preparing to invest $4 million in my company. The cognitive dissonance was overwhelming. I'd spend my mornings scrubbing Jake's toilet while he slept off another hangover, then spend my afternoon explaining complex AI algorithms to venture capitalists who saw me as the next big thing in Linda. would lecture me about realistic expectations during dinner. Then I'd retreat to my room for video calls with patent attorneys and regulatory compliance experts. Linda's surveillance had intensified since she'd noticed my increased confidence and mysterious phone calls. She'd started timing my bathroom breaks, monitoring my internet usage, and even questioning me about the official-looking mail that had supposedly been delivered to our address. I deflected her questions with vague references to job applications and insurance paperwork. "I just want to make sure you're not getting your hopes up about unrealistic opportunities," she said one evening, her voice dripping with fake concern. "Sometimes people take advantage of desperate job seekers with promises that sound too good to be true." Jake had joined Linda's surveillance efforts, probably at her request. He'd wander into my room at random times asking innocent-sounding questions about what I was working on. "Mom's worried you might be getting involved in some kind of scam," he mentioned during one of these fishing expeditions. "You know, those pyramid schemes that target college graduates." The irony was delicious. While they were trying to protect me from imaginary scams, I was actually building something that would make Jake's trust fund look like lunch money. But I had to be careful. Linda's sabotage attempts had shown me how far she'd go to maintain control over my life. The most challenging part of due diligence was providing references without revealing my current living situation. When Marcus's team wanted to verify my Harvard credentials and speak with professors who knew my work, I had to coordinate carefully to ensure none of these conversations happened while Linda was monitoring my activities. Professor Catherine Mills, who'd supervised my thesis on AI applications in financial services, gave me a glowing recommendation. "Bethany was one of the most innovative students I've taught," she told Sarah Chen during their phone call. "Her combination of technical skills and business acumen is rare. Whatever she's building, I'd invest in it." Dr. James Park, who'd taught my advanced algorithms course, confirmed the technical sophistication of my approach. The machine learning framework Bethany developed for her thesis was graduate-level research quality, he explained to David Rodriguez. "She has an intuitive understanding of how to make complex AI accessible to ordinary users." Each positive reference strengthened my position with the venture capital team, but also increased the pressure to maintain my secret. If Linda discovered that prestigious Harvard professors were praising my work to investors, she'd escalate her sabotage efforts beyond anything I'd experienced so far. The breakthrough came during week 3 of due diligence, when David completed his technical review. "Your code architecture is exceptionally clean," he told me during our final technical call. "The AI responds accurately to edge cases. The user interface is intuitive, and the system scales efficiently. From a technology perspective, this is ready for commercial deployment." Sarah's market analysis was equally positive. "Your customer acquisition projections are conservative, your competitive analysis is thorough, and your revenue model is sustainable," she reported. "The addressable market is larger than your projections suggest. You could capture significantly more users than you've estimated." As the due diligence period neared its end, I felt like a coiled spring ready to release. Everything was falling into place. The technology worked, the market opportunity was validated, and the investors were enthusiastic about moving forward. But I was still trapped in Linda's house, still cleaning toilets, still being treated like a family failure. Soon, though, that would all change. The legal documents in my possession weren't just business paperwork, they were my ticket to freedom. In a few days, I'd receive the phone call that would transform me from Linda's cleaning lady into the CEO of a multi-million-dollar startup. And when that call came, I was going to make sure my entire family understood exactly how wrong they'd been about me. The investment contract Marcus Webb emailed me at 3:47 p.m. on a Thursday afternoon was the most beautiful PDF I'd ever opened, but it was the phone call that followed that truly changed everything. I was in my childhood bedroom having just finished cleaning the guest bathroom Linda claimed needed urgent attention before her book club meeting. My hands still smelled like bleach when my phone rang, displaying Marcus's number. I answered on the first ring, trying to keep my voice steady despite my racing heart. "Bethany, congratulations," Marcus said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. "We've completed our due diligence and the partners voted unanimously to move forward with the investment. We're prepared to wire $4 million into your business account as soon as you sign the final documents." I sat down heavily on my twin bed, staring at the boy band posters on my wall, while processing what Marcus had just said. $4 million. More money than I'd ever imagined having. More than Jake's entire trust fund. More than enough to build the company of my dreams. "That's incredible news," I managed to say, though my voice came out as barely a whisper. "The terms are exactly as we discussed," Marcus continued. $4 million for 25% equity with milestone-based releases and a board seat. We'll need you to sign the final contracts and provide your banking information for the wire transfer. I looked around my bedroom, the same room where I'd cried myself to sleep after Linda's first toilet cleaning assignment, where I'd worked on my AI platform while my family mocked my Harvard degree, where I'd hidden my dreams while enduring daily humiliation. In a few hours, this room would be part of my past, not my prison. When can we schedule the contract signing? I asked. How about tomorrow morning? We can meet at our office at 10 a.m., finalize everything and initiate the wire transfer. You'll have access to the funds by Monday. After hanging up, I sat in stunned silence for several minutes. It was real. The investment was approved, the contracts were ready, and by Monday I'd be a multimillionaire entrepreneur. But first, I had to survive one more evening of Linda's condescension and Jake's mockery. Dinner that night was particularly painful, because I knew it would be my last meal as their victim. Linda had prepared her usual passive-aggressive commentary about my job search, while Jake regaled us with stories about his latest expensive purchases funded by his trust fund. Any luck with employment today? Linda asked with false sweetness. I saw you had another phone call this afternoon. Was it another one of those companies that never call back? Something like that, I replied, cutting my chicken and fighting back a smile. Jake jumped in with his own contribution. Maybe you should consider lowering your expectations. Not everyone can have a high-powered career just because they went to Harvard. Sometimes you have to start at the bottom and work your way up. The irony of Jake Hood never worked a day in his life, lecturing me about starting at the bottom was almost too much to bear. I nodded politely and made non-committal sounds while mentally calculating how my $4 million investment compared to his $2 million trust fund. After dinner, I retreated to my room and carefully read through every page of the investment contract. The terms were exactly as Marcus had outlined. SmartPath Financial AI would receive $4 million in exchange for 25% equity, with Marcus's firm taking one seat on a 3-person board of directors. The money would be released in tranches tied to specific milestones: product launch, user acquisition targets, and revenue goals. But beyond the financial details, what struck me most was seeing my name listed as founder and chief executive officer in official legal documents. After months of being treated like hired help by my own family, I was about to become the CEO of a funded startup with unlimited potential. I'd spent that evening planning my revelation strategy. I could simply pack up and leave without explanation, letting them discover my success through social media or news coverage. Or I could wait until the money was in my account and then calmly announce my new status during a family dinner. But neither option felt satisfying enough after everything they'd put me through. No. I wanted Linda to understand exactly how wrong she'd been about me. I wanted Jake to realize that his trust fund was small change compared to what I'd accomplished through actual work and innovation. I wanted my father to see that the daughter he'd allowed Linda to humiliate was more successful than he'd ever imagined. As I lay in bed that night, still smelling like bathroom cleaner, but knowing it was the last time I'd ever clean another toilet for Linda, I felt a peace I hadn't experienced in months. Tomorrow, Marcus would wire $4 million to my business account. By weekend, I'd have my own apartment, my own office, and my own life, free from Linda's manipulation. The Harvard diploma hanging on my wall, the one Linda had dismissed as an expensive piece of paper, was about to pay dividends beyond anything my family could comprehend. They'd made the mistake of underestimating me, and now they were about to discover exactly what Bethany Gordon was capable of achieving. But first, I had one more toilet to clean. Linda had left me a note requesting that I deep clean the powder room before her book club meeting tomorrow. I smiled as I read her instructions, knowing it would be my final performance in the role of family failure. Tomorrow, everything would change. Tonight, I was still their cleaning lady. By Monday, I'd be a multimillionaire CEO, and they'd finally understand who they'd been messing with. The company press release I'd spent all weekend crafting was scheduled to go live Monday morning. But first, I wanted to orchestrate the perfect family revelation. The wire transfer had cleared $4 million, now sat in my business account. I was officially the CEO of a funded startup. But Linda, Jake, and Dad had no idea their living cleaning lady had just become more successful than any of them. I'd spent the weekend apartment hunting and had already put a deposit down on a luxury 2-bedroom in the city's premier business district. I'd also signed a lease for office space, just 3 floors below Marcus's venture capital firm. By Wednesday, I'd be completely moved out and living my new life as a tech entrepreneur. But first, I wanted to savor the moment of revelation. Sunday. I have some news to share. He looked up from his book, surprised. Of course, sweetheart, is everything okay? Everything's fine, I assured him. I just want to discuss some changes in my situation with everyone at once. Dad nodded. probably assuming I was finally going to announce I'd found a job that would get me out of Linda's house. He had no idea I was about to reveal that his daughter had just secured more startup funding than most entrepreneurs see in their entire careers. I could hear Linda and Jake in the kitchen, and Linda's voice carried clearly through the house. She probably wants to tell us she's finally willing to take that receptionist job at Jake's dentist office, Linda was saying. I told Dr. Peterson she might be interested if they're still hiring. Jake laughed. Think she admits she was wrong about being too good for normal jobs? This should be entertaining. Their assumptions were perfectly predictable. Linda had convinced herself that months of humiliation and toilet cleaning had finally broken my spirit, that I was ready to accept my place as the family failure who needed their charity. With his dental hygienist friend, I spent Monday morning finalizing details for my new life. The press release was scheduled to go live at 2 p.m., announcing Financial AI's successful Series A funding round. TechCrunch had already confirmed they'd run a feature story, and the local business journal wanted to interview me about disrupting the financial services industry. But first, I had one final performance. As Linda's cleaning lady, she'd left me a list of chores that would keep me busy until dinner time, vacuuming, dusting, and organizing the garage. I completed each task methodically, knowing it was the last time I'd ever follow Linda's orders. Around noon, Linda cornered me in the laundry room. I hope you're planning to be realistic tonight, she said, folding Jake's expensive shirts. I know you're disappointed about how your job search has gone, but it's time to accept that maybe your expectations were too high. I think you'll be surprised by what I have to say, I replied, loading towels into the washing machine. Linda frowned. Bethany, I just don't want you to get your hopes up again. You've been through enough disappointment already. Sometimes we have to adjust our dreams to match reality. The condescension in her voice was stunning. Here was a woman who'd never worked a day in her life, who'd married my father for financial security and spent her time managing household staff and planning social events, lecturing me about adjusting my dreams to match reality. In a few hours, she'd learn exactly what reality looked like. Jake appeared in the doorway, probably sent by Linda to gauge my mood. Mom's worried you're going to make some big announcement about starting your own business or something crazy like that, he said, leaning against the doorframe. You're not going to embarrass yourself again, are you? What do you mean by again? I asked, though I knew exactly what he meant. You know, like when you thought Harvard was going to automatically make you successful, or when you kept talking about your innovative ideas that never went anywhere? Mom just wants you to be realistic for once. Jake's casual cruelty was almost impressive. He'd reduced my Harvard MBA to a delusion and my innovative technology to fantasy, all while standing in designer clothes, paid for with inherited money, but his dismissiveness would make my revelation even sweeter. That afternoon, I watched the TechCrunch article go live from my childhood bedroom. SmartPath Financial AI raises $4 million Series A to democratize financial planning. Read the headline, with a professional photo of me that the photographer had taken at Marcus's office. The article described me as a Harvard MBA whose innovative AI platform promises to make sophisticated financial advice accessible to middle-class families. Comments were already pouring in from industry experts praising the technology and predicting massive market potential. Bethany Gordon is going to revolutionize how ordinary families manage their money. But downstairs, Linda was preparing pot roast and Jake was playing video games, completely oblivious to the fact that the failure they'd been mocking was being celebrated across the technology industry. I carefully printed copies of the press release, the TechCrunch article, and a bank statement showing my account balance. Tonight's dinner conversation was going to be unlike anything my family had ever experienced. As I got dressed for dinner, choosing my nicest outfit for this special occasion, I thought about all the moments that had led to this revelation. Every toilet I'd scrubbed, every insult I'd endured, every night I'd worked on my AI platform while they slept peacefully upstairs. Convinced they were superior to me, Linda had set the dining room table with her good china, probably expecting to console me after another career disappointment. Dad had opened a bottle of wine, likely hoping to soften whatever bad news I was planning to share. Jake had even showered and put on a clean shirt, probably looking forward to another opportunity to mock my unrealistic expectations. They were all gathered around the table. Instead, they were about to discover that the woman they'd been treating like hired help was actually the most successful person in the room. The bank statement showing my $4 million account balance sat face down on the table beside my plate, but I wasn't ready to reveal it yet. I wanted to let Linda and Jake dig their hole a little deeper first. So, Linda began as she served the pot roast. What's this big announcement? Please tell me you're finally ready to be practical about your job search. Dad poured wine for everyone, his expression hopeful but cautious. He'd been through enough of these family dinners to know that Linda's idea of being practical usually meant humiliating me, until I accepted whatever scraps she deemed appropriate. I do have some career news to share, I said carefully, cutting my meat while savoring the anticipation. My situation has changed significantly. Jake leaned back in his chair, smirking. Let me guess you finally realized that Harvard doesn't guarantee success and you're ready to take that receptionist job. Or maybe you've decided to go back to school for something more practical, Linda added. There's no shame in admitting that business school wasn't the right fit. Some people just aren't cut out for high-level careers. The casual way they discussed my supposed failure was breathtaking. Linda spoke as if my Harvard MBA was a hobby I'd tried and abandoned, while Jake treated my career struggles as proof of his intellectual superiority. Neither of them could imagine that the woman they'd spent months humiliating had been building something extraordinary. Actually, I said, taking a sip of wine, I've started my own company. The reaction was immediate and predictable. Linda rolled her eyes dramatically while Jake actually laughed out loud. Bethany, honey, Linda said in her most patronizing voice, we've talked about this. Starting a business requires capital, experience, and realistic expectations. You can't just decide to be an entrepreneur because you're having trouble finding employment. Jake was still chuckling. What kind of business? Let me guess you're going to be a life coach or start a blog about financial advice. Those internet businesses are usually just scams that prey on desperate people. Dad looked uncomfortable but didn't intervene. He'd learned years ago that challenging Linda's assessments led to days of passive-aggressive punishment for the entire household. I've developed an AI-powered financial planning platform, I continued, ignoring their condescension. It uses machine learning to provide personalized investment advice and budgeting recommendations to middle-class families. Linda set down her fork and stared at me with a mixture of concern and irritation. Bethany, please stop this fantasy. You're not a technology expert. You don't have any money to start a business. And you certainly don't have the connections necessary to launch something like that. Mom's right, Jake added, suddenly serious. You've been living in our house, cleaning bathrooms for months? How could you possibly have been building a tech company? Be honest, is this some kind of pyramid scheme that's convinced you you're starting a business? Their disbelief was so complete that they couldn't even consider the possibility I was telling the truth. In their minds, the failure who cleaned their toilets couldn't possibly have created anything valuable. I understand your skepticism, I said, reaching for the papers beside my plate, but I have documentation that might change your perspective. I placed the TechCrunch article in the center of the table, headline facing up. SmartPath Financial AI raises $4 million Series A to democratize financial planning. The silence that followed was deafening. Linda picked up the article and read it carefully, her face growing paler with each sentence. Jake leaned over to read over her shoulder, his smirk fading as he processed what he was seeing. This has to be fake, Linda whispered. Someone with the same name as you. Or maybe you paid someone to write this fake article. I placed the bank statement next to the article. $4 million in my business account, deposited by Venture Dynamics LLC just 3 days earlier. Dad reached for the bank statement with shaking hands. Bethany, is this real? Completely real? I confirmed. Venture Dynamics invested $4 million in my company last Friday. I'm the founder and CEO of SmartPath Financial AI, and we're launching commercially next month. Jake was staring at the documents like they were written in a foreign language. But you've been cleaning our bathrooms? You've been broke and living at home? How is this possible? I was building my company while living here, I explained calmly. Every night after completing Linda's cleaning assignments, I worked on developing my AI platform. While you assumed I was a failure, I was creating technology that's going to revolutionize financial planning. Linda's face had gone from pale to red. You were lying to us? All this time you were pretending to be struggling while secretly building a business? I wasn't lying, I corrected. I was working. The same Harvard education you dismissed as worthless gave me the knowledge to create this technology. The same unrealistic expectations you mocked were actually achievable goals. The power dynamic in the room had shifted so dramatically that I could feel the change in the air. Linda, who'd spent months controlling every aspect of my life, was suddenly faced with the reality that I was more successful than she'd ever been. Jake, who'd lorded his trust fund over me, was confronting the fact that I'd earned twice his inheritance through actual innovation. This changes nothing, Linda said finally, her voice tight with anger. You still live in this house, you still need to follow our rules, and you still need to show respect for this family. But even as she said it, we all knew everything had changed. The woman who'd forced me to clean toilets was sitting across from a multimillionaire entrepreneur whose success story was being covered by major technology publications. I smiled and reached into my purse for one final document, the lease agreement for my new apartment. Actually, Linda, I'll be moving out tomorrow. I've already arranged for movers to collect my belongings, and I've signed a lease for a place in the city. The look of panic that crossed Linda's face was worth every moment of humiliation I'd endured. She was losing control of me and she knew it. The house deed research I'd commissioned that afternoon revealed something fascinating. My family's beautiful suburban home was mortgaged to the hilt, with payments that stretched Dad's income to its limits. But more importantly, the property was worth exactly $800,000 less than one-fifth of what I now had in my business account. I'd discovered this information not out of malice, but out of curiosity about my family's true financial situation. Linda had spent months lecturing me about money and realistic expectations, but her own household was apparently built on debt and financial stress that she'd hidden behind designer handbags and expensive dinners. The revelation dinner had ended, with Linda storming off to her bedroom and Jake sitting in stunned silence while Dad repeatedly read my bank statement, as if the numbers might change, but I wasn't done. The balance of power had shifted, and I intended to make the most of it. The next morning, I was packing my belongings when Linda appeared in my doorway. Gone was the condescending stepmother who'd handed me cleaning supplies just weeks earlier. Instead, she looked desperate and slightly panicked. "Bethany, I think we need to talk," she said, her voice carefully controlled. "Maybe I was too harsh about your career prospects. I just wanted to protect you from disappointment." I continued folding clothes into boxes. "Protect me from disappointment. Is that what you call sabotaging my investor meetings and intercepting my mail?" Linda's face flushed. "I don't know what you're talking about." "I have screenshots of the emails you sent to Marcus Webb's office," I replied calmly. "I also have photos of all the business documents you hid in your bedroom. Did you really think I wouldn't figure out what you were doing?" The color drained from Linda's face. She'd been caught, and we both knew it. "I was just concerned about your emotional state," she said weakly. "You seemed so stressed, and I thought you could control me by sabotaging my opportunities," I interrupted. "But what you actually did was delay my success by a few weeks. The investment would have happened regardless of your interference." Jake appeared in the hallway behind Linda, clearly eavesdropping. Since learning about my success, he'd been uncharacteristically quiet, but I could see the wheels turning in his mind. His trust fund, which had seemed so impressive just days earlier, now looked modest compared to my startup funding. "Hey, Bethany," he said, attempting his old casual tone but failing to hide his nervousness. "I was thinking maybe I could help with your company somehow. I've got some business ideas, and with my trust fund, I could be an investor or partner." The audacity was stunning. Jake, who'd spent months mocking my Harvard education and calling me the family failure, was now trying to attach himself to my success. The same person who'd introduced me to his friends as the Harvard janitor was suddenly interested in being my business partner. "That's generous of you, Jake," I replied, "but I already have all the investors I need. Venture Dynamics is providing both funding and strategic guidance, but I could bring something different to the table," Jake pressed on. "Fresh perspectives, maybe some marketing ideas. We could be like a family business." Linda jumped on this suggestion. "That's a wonderful idea. Jake has such creative insights, and it would be nice to keep the success in the family." I looked at both of them, the stepmother who'd sabotaged my career and the stepbrother, who'd humiliated me for months, and felt a calm satisfaction. They were scrambling to benefit from the success they'd tried to prevent, begging for inclusion in the company they'd dismissed as fantasy. "I appreciate the offer," I said, "but SmartPath Financial AI will be operated independently. I won't be mixing family with business." Dad appeared at the end of the hallway, clearly drawn by the tension in the conversation. He looked older than I remembered, worn down by months of watching Linda humiliate me while feeling powerless to intervene. "Bethany," he said quietly, "I owe you an apology. I should have stood up for you more. I should have seen what you were building instead of letting Linda convince me you needed to be toughened up." His apology meant more than Linda's panic or Jake's sudden interest in my success. Dad had genuinely failed me, but at least he could acknowledge it. "I understand, Dad. Linda can be very persuasive when she wants to control a situation." Linda bristled at this characterization. "I wasn't trying to control anything. I was trying to help Bethany develop realistic expectations and a strong work ethic." "A strong work ethic," I laughed. "Linda, your idea of helping me develop work ethic was making me clean toilets while Jake lounged by the pool spending his inheritance. You weren't building my character, you were satisfying your need to humiliate someone you saw as a threat." "A threat?" Linda's voice rose. "How could you possibly be a threat to me?" "Because I represent everything you're not," I replied honestly. "I earned my success through education, innovation, and hard work. You married into your lifestyle, and my existence reminds you that some people create their own opportunities instead of relying on others." The truth hit Linda like a physical blow. She'd spent months trying to diminish me because my potential success highlighted her own lack of accomplishment. By forcing me to clean toilets, she'd been trying to reduce me to her level, someone dependent on others for their lifestyle, and status. Jake was still hovering nearby, probably hoping I'd change my mind about his partnership offer. But Jake represented the worst kind of entitlements, someone who'd been given everything and learned nothing. His trust fund had made him wealthy, but it hadn't made him capable, ambitious, or valuable as a business partner. I need to finish packing, I said, returning to my boxers. The movers will be here in a few hours. Linda made one final attempt to regain control. You know, this house will always be your home. When your business fails, and most startups do fail, you'll always have a place here. I stopped packing and looked at her directly. Linda, I've seen your mortgage documents. This house is leveraged to 95% of its value, and Dad's salary barely covers the payments. If anyone's financial situation is precarious, it's yours, not mine. The statement hung in the air like a bomb. Linda had built her entire identity around being the wealthy wife who could afford to look down on others. But the reality was that she lived in a house of cards that could collapse with one missed payment. Dad looked confused. How do you know about our mortgage? I had a real estate attorney research the property as part of understanding my options, I explained. I wanted to know if buying the house from you might be a good investment for my company. Linda went pale. You investigated our finances? I investigated the property's value and financing structure, I corrected. It's public record information. And what I learned is that you've been lecturing me about financial responsibility while living beyond your own means. Jake was staring at me with a mixture of awe and fear. For the first time in his life, he was meeting someone who had more power than he did, and he didn't know how to handle it. Look, he said finally, maybe we got off on the wrong foot. I was just joking around with all that stuff about Harvard and your career. You know, I didn't mean it seriously. Every insult, every joke, every moment of condescension had been genuine. Jake had truly believed he was superior to me because he had inherited money while I was struggling. To launch my career, now that the tables had turned, he wanted to rewrite history and pretend his cruelty had been harmless. Teasing, I appreciate the clarification, Jake, I said diplomatically, but actions have consequences. You spent months treating me like a failure, and now you want to be my business partner? That's not how relationships work. Linda was still processing the revelation about their mortgage situation. You can't just investigate people's private financial information, she said weakly. Actually, I can investigate any public records I want, I replied. And what I found is that while you were lecturing me about being realistic and practical, you were living in a house you can't afford, driving cars that are probably leased, and maintaining a lifestyle that's completely dependent on Dad's income. The hypocrisy was finally exposed. Linda, who'd positioned herself as the family's financial expert, was actually living paycheck to paycheck while maintaining appearances. Her lectures about my unrealistic expectations had come from someone whose own life was built on financial fantasy. As I finished packing my Harvard diploma, the same piece of paper Linda had dismissed as worthless sigh reflected on how completely the situation had reversed. Today, I was leaving as a funded entrepreneur with unlimited potential and complete financial independence. The moving truck pulled up as I carried my last box downstairs. Linda watched from the window as professional movers loaded my belongings, probably calculating how much the service cost and comparing it to her own household budget. This doesn't have to be the end of our relationship, Dad said as I prepared to leave. You're still my daughter, regardless of everything that's happened. He was right, of course. Despite everything, Dad was still my father and I still loved him. But our relationship would need to be rebuilt on new terms, ones where I was treated as an equal adult, not as Linda's victim. I'd like that, I told him honestly, but things will be different now. I won't be coming back for family dinners, where Linda treats me like hired help. And I won't be pretending that the last few months were acceptable. As I drove away from the house where I'd been humiliated and underestimated, I felt lighter than I had in years. The family that had tried to keep me small was watching me leave for a life bigger than anything they could imagine. And the best part was that this was just the beginning. The moving contract I signed for my luxury apartment represented more than just a change of address. It was my declaration of independence from a family that had tried to keep me trapped in their version of who I should be. As I stood in my new living room surrounded by boxes and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, when family members entered the room, no more cleaning other people's messes while they questioned my life choices. No more pretending to be grateful for the privilege of being humiliated in my own home. The first few days of independence were intoxicating. I woke up when I wanted, worked on my company without interruption, and made decisions based solely on my own priorities. But the real test came when Linda started calling Bethany I think there's been a misunderstanding, she said during her third call that week. Get your business established. The suggestion was absurd. Linda had spent months making it clear I was a burden and a failure. But now that I was successful, she wanted me back under her roof, where she could attempt to reassert control. I'm very comfortable in my new apartment, I replied calmly. And my business is already established. Marcus's team had connected me with top-tier developers, and we'd built a platform that exceeded even my original vision. Early user feedback was overwhelmingly positive, and several financial publications had requested interviews about our innovative up at coffee shops near my apartment, coincidentally running into me and suggesting we grab lunch to catch up. During these encounters, he'd inevitably steered the conversation toward my company and hint about investment opportunities. I've been thinking about diversifying my trust fund portfolio, he mentioned. During one such ambush, maybe putting some money into promising startups? Your company seems like exactly the kind of innovative business I should support. The irony was staggering. Jake, who'd spent months calling me a failure and mocking my Harvard education, now wanted to invest in the company he'd dismissed as fantasy. But I'd learned something important about boundaries during my time cleaning toilets. I appreciate your interest, Jake, but we're not seeking additional investors. At this time, I replied, Venture Dynamics is providing all the funding and strategic guidance we need. My father's attempts at reconciliation were more genuine, but equally complicated. He'd asked me to lunch several times, always choosing restaurants far from the house to avoid Linda's interference. During these meetings, he'd apologized repeatedly for not protecting me from Linda's treatment. I knew what she was doing wasn't right, he admitted, during our second lunch, but she convinced me that you needed to learn about real-world expectations, and I was too weak to fight her on it. Dad's guilt was obvious and painful to watch. He'd failed me when I needed his support most, and we both knew it. But, unlike Linda and Jake, his remorse seemed authentic rather than strategic. Her humiliate me for months without saying anything. The boundary I established with Dad was clear but not cruel. We could rebuild our relationship, but it would take time and couldn't include Linda. I wasn't interested in family dinners where she could resume her manipulation, and I wouldn't pretend that her behavior had been acceptable just to maintain peace. Linda's reaction to these boundaries was predictable and revealing. When she realized I wouldn't be drawn back into her control, she shifted tactics and started telling people I'd changed since becoming successful. Family friends, and they perfectly illustrated Linda's inability to take responsibility for her actions. In her version of events, I was the problem for refusing to accept continued mistreatment, not her for creating the toxic dynamic in the first place. The most satisfying boundary I established was professional. When local business publications wanted to interview me about my success story, I told the truth about my journey, including the months I'd spent cleaning toilets while building my company. The interviews positioned me as an inspiring example of perseverance in the face of family skepticism. Sometimes the people closest to us can't see our potential, I told one journalist. I was fortunate to have the education and determination to pursue my vision despite the lack of support from my family. The articles portrayed Linda and Jake exactly as they deserved, to be seen as people who'd underestimated and mistreated someone who went on to achieve extraordinary success. They'd wanted to be associated with my triumph, but instead became cautionary examples of how not to treat ambitious family members. 6 weeks after moving out, I received an unexpected visitor at my office. Linda appeared in my reception area, dressed in her most expensive outfit and carrying flowers as if this were a social call. I'm Bethany's stepmother, and I'd like to discuss some family business. But I wasn't the same person who'd lived in her house and followed her rules. If she'd like to discuss something, she can email me like anyone else. Watching Linda's face through my office window as she was politely but firmly turned away was a moment of pure justice. I sat in my beautiful apartment reviewing user feedback from customers whose financial lives were being transformed by my AI platform. The contrast was striking. While Linda was plotting new ways to insert herself into my success, I was actually changing people's lives for the better. I'd learned that true boundaries aren't about punishment or revenge. They're about protecting yourself from people who've proven they can't be trusted with access to your life. The office lease agreement I signed for SmartPath Financial AI's headquarters was for the entire 40th floor of the city's most prestigious business tower. Standing in the empty space with Marcus Webb, looking out over the skyline while discussing our expansion plans, I felt like I was living in someone else's dream. This is perfect, Marcus said, examining the floor plan. Plenty of space for your current team and room to scale to 100 employees over the next 2 years. 3 months after moving out of Linda's house, my company had grown from a one-person operation to a team of 12 brilliant minds working to revolutionize personal finance. I'd hired 2 Harvard classmates as senior developers, recruited a former Goldman Sachs vice president as our head of business development, and brought on a marketing expert who'd previously launched 3 successful fintech startups. My apartment in the same building was equally impressive, a corner unit with panoramic city views, designer furniture, and smart home technology that made Linda's suburban house look quaint by comparison. Every morning, I'd take the elevator down to my office, running a company that was valued at over $20 million and growing rapidly. The user growth exceeded all our projections. What had started as 1,000 beta users had exploded to over 50,000 paying customers in just 2 months. The AI platform was processing millions of dollars in financial transactions and providing personalized advice that was genuinely improving people's lives. The testimonials were overwhelming. SmartPath helped me pay off my credit card debt and start saving for my daughter's college fund, wrote one customer. I never thought I could afford professional financial advice, but this AI gives me everything a wealth manager would provide for a fraction of the cost. Media coverage had transformed me from an unknown Harvard graduate into one of the city's most prominent young entrepreneurs. Forbes featured me in their 30 Under 30 technology list. The Wall Street Journal ran a profile titled The AI Pioneer, Democratizing Financial Planning. Harvard Business School invited me back as a guest lecturer, discussing how to turn academic research into commercial success. But the most satisfying recognition came from my peers in the venture capital community. Marcus introduced me at industry events as one of the most promising founders we've ever backed, and other VCs were already approaching me about future funding rounds. In less than 6 months, I'd gone from cleaning toilets to being courted by the same investors who funded companies like Uber and Airbnb. The contrast with my previous life was surreal. 6 months ago, Linda had handed me rubber gloves and lectured me about realistic expectations. Now I was managing a multi-million-dollar budget, making strategic decisions that affected thousands of customers, and building a company that could fundamentally change how middle-class families managed their money. My team respected me not because of who my family was or what I'd inherited, but because of what I'd built and how I led them. The Harvard education Linda had dismissed as worthless was now the foundation of everything I'd achieved. The innovative thinking she'd called unrealistic was generating millions in revenue and creating real value for our customers. The irony wasn't lost on me that Jake's trust fund, which had seemed so impressive when he gained access to it, was now less than 1/10 of my company's valuation. While he'd been buying luxury cars and planning expensive vacations, I'd been building something that created lasting wealth rather than just spending inherited money. I established a company culture based on merit, innovation, and respect, everything that had been missing from my family dynamic. Our morning meetings were collaborative discussions where the best ideas won, regardless of who suggested them. Our office had meditation rooms, a fully stocked kitchen, and flexible work arrangements that prioritized results over FaceTime. The recruiting process for new employees became an exercise in recognizing talent that others might overlook. I hired brilliant developers who'd been underestimated at their previous companies, innovative thinkers who'd been stifled by corporate bureaucracy, and ambitious professionals who wanted to build something meaningful rather than just collect paychecks. You have an unusual ability to spot potential in people, Marcus observed during one of our monthly board meetings. Your hiring decisions have been remarkably successful. The observation made me think about my months in Linda's house. When my own potential had been completely invisible to the people who knew me best, I'd learned to recognize the signs of hidden capability, the quiet determination that others might mistake for resignation or failure. Local business schools started inviting me to speak about entrepreneurship and overcoming adversity. During these talks, I'd share my story of building a company while living with family members who didn't believe in my vision. The audiences were always inspired by the journey from toilet cleaning to tech CEO, but I emphasized that the real lesson was about perseverance and self-belief. Success isn't about proving other people wrong, I'd tell students. It's about proving yourself right. I didn't build this company to show my family they were mistaken about me, built it because I knew it would help people and create value in the world. The financial rewards were extraordinary, but the personal satisfaction was even greater. Every time a customer wrote to thank us for helping them achieve financial stability, every time a team member told me how much they loved working for the company, every time an industry expert praised our innovation, I remembered those nights. In my childhood bedroom, when this had all seemed like an impossible dream, Linda's predictions about my inevitable failure looked more ridiculous each day. The startup she'd dismissed as fantasy was now being studied by business schools. As a case study in successful entrepreneurship, the Harvard education she'd called wasteful had generated a return on investment that dwarfed most traditional careers, standing In my corner office, watching my team collaborate on features that would help millions of families build better financial futures, I realized I'd accomplished something Linda and Jake could never understand. I hadn't just built wealth, I'd built something that mattered, something that improved people's lives, something that would outlast any inheritance or trust fund. The woman they'd tried to keep small had built an empire, and it was just the beginning. The Christmas card photo Linda sent me 6 months after I'd moved out was a masterpiece of desperate image management. In it, she and Jake stood flanking my father in front of their over-mortgaged house, all three wearing forced smiles and expensive clothes that probably maxed out their credit cards. The printed message inside read, "Wishing our successful daughter Bethany a wonderful holiday season. We're so proud of everything you've accomplished." The transformation was stunning. The same woman who'd handed me toilet brushes and lectured me about realistic expectations was now claiming credit for my success and trying to associate herself with my achievements. But 6 months of building SmartPath Financial AI had taught me that actions matter more than words. And Linda's actions had revealed exactly who she was. I decided to attend their Christmas gathering, partly out of curiosity about how they'd handle the new dynamic and partly because Dad had asked me personally. He'd continued our monthly lunches and seemed genuinely committed to rebuilding our relationship on healthier terms. The house looked exactly the same, but everything felt different when I walked through the door wearing a custom suit that cost more than Jake's monthly trust fund distribution. Linda rushed to greet me with an enthusiasm that would have been laughable if it weren't so transparent. "Bethany, oh my goodness, you look absolutely wonderful," she gushed, embracing me like we were long-lost best friends instead of stepfamily members who'd had a toxic relationship for 16 years. "We've been following all your success in the papers. We're just so incredibly proud." Jake's greeting was equally surreal. Gone was the condescending stepbrother who'd mocked my Harvard education and called me a failure. Instead, he approached with an almost reverent tone, clearly intimidated by the transformation in our relative status. "Hey Bethany, congratulations on everything. That Forbes article was really impressive." He paused, clearly working up the courage for his next statement. "I've actually been thinking a lot about what you said regarding my business ideas. Maybe I could take some entrepreneurship classes or something, learn how to really build something meaningful." The contrast was jarring. 6 months ago, Jake had been lounging by the pool while I cleaned his bathroom, confident that his trust fund made him superior to someone with a Harvard MBA and innovative ideas. Now he was asking for my advice about becoming an entrepreneur, speaking to me with the deference he'd never shown before. Dad's pride was genuine and touching. "I've been bragging about you to everyone at work," he told me as we sat down for dinner. "My colleagues can't believe my daughter built such a successful company. I should have supported you more from the beginning, but it was Linda's performance that truly demonstrated how completely the power balance had shifted. She'd prepared my favorite meal, hung framed newspaper articles about my company on the walls, and even cleared space on the mantelpiece for a photo of me accepting an award from the Chamber of Commerce. I always knew you had special potential," she declared during dinner, rewriting history with breathtaking audacity. "That's why I encouraged you to stay home and focus on developing your ideas instead of rushing into some corporate job that would have limited your creativity." The revisionism was stunning. Linda was actually claiming that forcing me to clean toilets had been a strategic move to help me build my company. The woman who'd sabotaged my investor meetings was now portraying herself as my mentor and biggest supporter. Jake joined the gaslighting effort. I remember telling my friends that Bethany was working on something big. I could tell she had this entrepreneurial energy, even when she was living here. I listened to their attempts to reframe my humiliation as their contribution to my success, marveling at their ability to completely reimagine events to suit their current needs. But I'd learned something important during my months of building a real business. Success gives you the power to define your own narrative. "Actually," I said calmly, "I remember things quite differently. Linda, you spent months telling me to lower my expectations and accept that my Harvard education had been a waste of money. Jake, you regularly called me a failure and suggested I take a receptionist job to learn humility." The room fell silent. Linda's smile faltered and Jake looked uncomfortable, but neither of them contradicted my version of events. "But," I continued, "I'm grateful for the experience. Being underestimated and dismissed taught me that external validation isn't necessary for success. You forced me to develop complete self-reliance and unshakable confidence in my own judgment." Dad nodded slowly. "Your mother would have been so proud of how you handled everything," he said quietly. "She always said you had the strength to overcome any obstacle." The mention of my real mother, the one who'd believed in my potential and encouraged My dreams created a moment of genuine emotion in the room. Linda's attempts to claim credit for my success felt particularly hollow in comparison to what my actual mother had given me: unconditional love and unwavering faith in my abilities. As the evening progressed, Linda and Jake continued their campaign. To associate themselves with my achievements, they asked detailed questions about my company, my investment funding, and my future plans, clearly hoping to find ways to insert themselves into my success story, but their efforts only highlighted how fundamentally they misunderstood what I'd accomplished. They saw my company as a lucky break, a windfall similar to Jake's trust fund that could be shared with family members. They couldn't grasp that SmartPath Financial AI was the result of years of education, months of development, and ongoing strategic decisions that required real expertise. "Maybe we could plan a family vacation together," Linda suggested as the evening wound down. "Somewhere nice to celebrate your success. I saw some beautiful resorts in Tuscany that would be perfect for a family bonding trip." The suggestion revealed everything about Linda's mindset. She wanted to enjoy the benefits of my success without acknowledging her role in trying to prevent it. She imagined expensive vacations funded by my company, while conveniently forgetting the months she'd forced me to clean toilets and undermined my career efforts. "I appreciate the invitation," I replied diplomatically, "but my travel schedule is completely booked with business obligations. Running a growing company doesn't leave much time for extended vacations." As I prepared to leave, Dad walked me to my Cara Tesla Model S that cost more than his annual salary. "I know Linda and Jake are trying too hard," he said honestly. "They're not used to being around someone as successful as you've become." His assessment was accurate but incomplete. Linda and Jake weren't just uncomfortable with my success. They were terrified by the complete reversal of our family hierarchy. The person they'd treated as a burden and failure was now the most accomplished member of the family, and they had no idea how to navigate that reality. Driving back to my luxury apartment, I reflected on how satisfying the evening had been, not because of Linda's desperate attempts to claim credit for my success, or Jake's newfound respect, but because I'd finally experienced what it felt like to be in a room where everyone recognized my worth. The family that had tried to diminish me was now forced to acknowledge that they'd been completely wrong about my potential. The Christmas card photo Linda had sent would look very different if it were honest. Instead of 3 people taking credit for my achievements, it would show a woman who'd sabotaged her stepdaughter's career, a man who'd inherited wealth without earning it, and a father who'd failed to protect his daughter when she needed him most. But I didn't need their acknowledgement or their revised version of history. I had something much more valuable: a company that was changing people's lives, a team that respected my leadership, and the knowledge that I'd built everything myself, despite their attempts to hold me back. The Harvard Alumni Magazine feature that arrived in my office mail exactly 1 year after I'd moved out of Linda's house felt like a message from the universe. The cover story was titled "From Setback to Success: How Bethany Gordon Built a Tech Empire While Living at Home," and seeing my photo on the cover of my alma mater's most prestigious publication was both surreal and deeply satisfying. The article traced my journey from Harvard MBA to toilet cleaning family failure to successful tech entrepreneur, positioning me as an inspiring example of perseverance in the face of adversity. The journalist had interviewed my professors, my investors, and several customers whose lives had been transformed by SmartPath Financial AI, quoted as saying, "She took academic knowledge and transformed it into real-world solutions that help ordinary families build better financial futures, just market opportunities." Reading those words while sitting in my corner office, overlooking a city where my company now employed 47 people and served over 200,000 customers, back then, I'd been scrubbing toilets while family members mocked my Harvard education and questioned my basic competence. The transformation wasn't just professional, it was deeply personal. I'd learned that other people's limitations aren't your limitations, that external circumstances don't define internal potential. AI had exceeded every projection Marcus and his team had made during our initial investment discussions. We were processing over $500 million in customer assets, had expanded into insurance and investment advisory services, and were being courted by major financial institutions interested in licensing our technology. More importantly, we were genuinely improving people's lives. The AI platform had helped customers pay off over $50 million in high-interest debt, increase their savings rates by an average of 40%, and make investment decisions that were building real wealth for middle-class families who'd never had access. 2. Sophisticated financial advice. The customer testimonials that filled my inbox daily were more valuable than any press coverage or industry recognition. "SmartPath helped me buy my first house," wrote one user. "I never thought someone like me could afford homeownership, but the AI showed me exactly how to save for a down payment and improve my credit score. These messages reminded me why I'd built the company in the first place, not to prove my family wrong, but to solve a real problem that affected millions of people. The fact that my success had exposed Linda and Jake's character flaws was just a bonus. The Harvard article included a sidebar about my advice for other entrepreneurs facing family skepticism. Don't let other people's inability to see your potential become your inability to pursue your dreams. I was quoted as saying, "Sometimes the people closest to us are the least capable of recognizing our capabilities because they're invested in maintaining the status quo." That insight had come from hard experience. Linda's attempts to sabotage my career hadn't been motivated by concern for my well-being. They'd been driven by her need to maintain a family hierarchy where she held power over others. My success threatened that dynamic, which is why she'd worked so hard to prevent it. Jake's mockery had served a similar purpose. By positioning himself as superior to someone with a Harvard MBA and innovative ideas, he'd been protecting his ego from the reality that inherited wealth wasn't the same as personal achievement. My success forced him to confront the difference between being given money and earning it. The most gratifying part of the Harvard article was how it positioned my story within the broader context of entrepreneurial success. I wasn't portrayed as someone who'd overcome family adversity, was presented as an innovator who'd identified a market opportunity and executed brilliantly, despite challenging circumstances. This framing was important because it emphasized the real source of my success: education, hard work, innovation, and strategic thinking. Linda and Jake could try to take credit for toughening me up or providing motivation through adversity, but the truth was that I'd succeeded despite their behavior, not because of it. The magazine feature generated dozens of speaking requests from business schools, entrepreneurship conferences, and professional organizations. Each presentation gave me an opportunity to share lessons I'd learned about perseverance, self-belief, and the importance of surrounding yourself with people who support your ambitions rather than undermining them. The most dangerous people in your life aren't your enemies, I'd tell audiences. They're the family members and friends who love you enough to want to protect you from disappointment by convincing you to dream smaller. That message resonated particularly strongly with young women who'd been told to be realistic about their career aspirations or to prioritize stability over innovation. Many approached me after speeches to share their own stories of family members who'd discouraged their ambitions or questioned their capabilities. As I reflected on the year since leaving Linda's house, I realized that the most valuable thing I'd gained wasn't money or professional recognition. It was the unshakable knowledge that I could trust my own judgment even when everyone around me disagreed. The toilet brushes Linda had handed me with such condescension were now museum pieces in my memory, symbols of a time when other people's opinions carried more weight than my own self-knowledge. The Harvard diploma she'd dismissed as worthless had generated a return on investment that exceeded most traditional careers by several orders of magnitude. But the real victory wasn't financial, it was personal. I'd learned to set boundaries with toxic people, to recognize manipulation disguised as concern, and to pursue my vision regardless of external validation or approval. Linda still sent occasional emails, trying to insert herself into my success story, but I rarely responded. Jake had attempted to launch his own tech startup with disastrous results, proving that access to capital wasn't the same as entrepreneurial capability. Dad and I had rebuilt our relationship on healthier terms, with regular lunches where we discussed my company's growth and his gradual recognition of Linda's manipulative behavior. The Harvard Alumni magazine now sat framed on my office wall, next to photos of my team, awards from industry organizations, and thank you letters from customers. It represented not just professional achievement, but personal transformation. The journey from someone who cleaned other people's toilets to someone who built technology that improved other people's lives. Looking back, I'm grateful for every moment of humiliation, every dismissive comment, and every attempt to make me smaller than I was capable of becoming. They showed me that other people's limitations don't have to become your limitations, and that sometimes the greatest success comes from proving yourself right, rather than proving others wrong. The woman who'd scrubbed toilets while building an AI empire in secret had become the CEO whose story inspired others to pursue their own impossible dreams, was the real measure of how far I'd come.